Hello, good evening, and welcome to the first curtain raiser of the TOTO Awards 2022. Today, we meet and chat with the four photographers who have been shortlisted for the TOTO Award for Photography 2022 and discover a little about their process, style, and approach to their work. Before we go on, a little bit about TFA, TOTO Funds the Arts, the organization. TFA was established as a trust in Bangalore in 2004. It was set up in memory of Angiras Toto Velani, who passed away in a tragic accident in Goa on May 24th, 2004. TFA gives young Indian artists, a platform to share their work through readings, film screenings, talks, and other arts-related events. TFA also hosts annual awards in the fields of music, creative writing in English and Kannada, photography, and short film. Rather than achievement, these national level awards are more in the nature of recognizing potential for artistic growth in these fields. Today's four photographers have been shortlisted by an external jury for the 2022 TOTO Photography Awards, which are supported by the Art and Photography Foundation. Farin Fatma from Chandigarh, Brishbhanu Baruah from Guwahati, Prakash Bhuyan, also from Guwahati, and Vijay Sarathy from Chennai. These four will be in conversation with Anshika Varma about their photographic practices and their shortlisted works. Two winners will be announced in a virtual award ceremony on the 19th of February. Now, a little bit about Anshika Varma, our moderator for today. Anshika Varma is a photographer and curator and explores the intricate relationship between memory and object as markers of identity. In 2018, Anshika founded Offset Projects out of New Delhi to explore the various engagements and sociological impact of receiving the world through creative expressions in visual language. As a photographer and curator, she was keen to use the photograph in conversations outside of her community related to storytelling, identity, and history. Offset Projects works to create channels of engagement in photography and bookmaking through artist talks, workshops, residencies, curated reading rooms, and collaborative exercises in publishing. And now, over to Anshika and our shortlisted photographers.
Thank you for the introduction. Before we begin the official conversation, I want to say congratulations to all four of these young photographers that I'm very happy to be in an official conversation with today. We've had a little getting to know each other session, and I have to say it was really, really exciting to know that in this shortlist we have photographers who are exploring very unique and very different languages and genres of photography that have been put together. And I think it's very interesting because it also shows that the format of the documentary is expanding, with its practice across the spectrum. So I'm really happy to kind of be in this chat mode with Vijay, with Prakash, with Farheen and Brishbhanu today, who all come from different parts of the country as well. I think what would be nice is for us to maybe get to know a little bit about these photographers, who they are, what kind of interests they have, and to also get maybe a short peek into what are the works that have been shortlisted by the jury for this year as well. And I think it would be nice, Vijay, maybe we can start with you and you can share a little bit, and I'll let you guys go one after the other, and then we'll break open into a more candid conversation.
Thank you so much, Anshika. And I just want to start by saying thank you to the entire team at TOTO for this wonderful space that they've brought forth for all of us to talk. I just want to start by giving a little bit of introduction to myself. So my name is Vijay. I am a visual artist and a photographer from Chennai. So I was in Chennai. I was working as a designer. After my college, I did engineering, and after that, I was working for 3 years in a corporate job here. And photography was something that was independently happening. I had just picked up a camera to explore, uh, to give a language to the creative domain within me, and that was happening independently. So what happened in 2019 was I was getting really fed up with the city life, and I was feeling I was going through a mental health crisis. So one of my friends who lives in the mountains right now, she called me there for a trip to Spiti, which is a beautiful, beautiful, desolate winterland that I'm sure like many people in India will be familiar with. But that's literally how my journey with the landscape started. That was my first trip. And I really fell in love with everything that I saw there. And I really fell in love with what the landscape was bringing out within me. Um, I felt like it was opening up new frontiers or new domains within me that I'd just not seen before. And then after that, I sort of came back here to Chennai, and then I kept making more and more trips back to the mountains. And every single time I used to go there, I just ended up falling more and more in love with it. So eventually in 2020, early 2020, I quit my job and I decided to travel around the Himalayas for a year. But we know what happened in 2020. So I just ended up staying in one place for nearly 6 to 7 months. It was a beautiful village called Dharamkot in Himachal Pradesh. But I'm still quite grateful for the time because it showed me a lot. So just about photography as well, that has always been a language because I'm someone who considers myself as an introvert. So I have quite some trouble expressing my innermost feelings. So what happened was once I moved to the mountains, or once I started adventuring around in the mountains, I found like these beautiful feelings that were coming up within me, and photography just became the channel through which I could explore these feelings, and I could let the world know that this is happening within me. And so just moving on a little bit to my work. So my work over the last couple of years, or rather that's the entire body of work that I've made, is revolves around landscapes. So what I try to do is I try to use landscape as a vehicle or as a vessel to talk about states of the mind, inner states that you're feeling. So I try to go away from linear narratives or documentary because that's something I've never been quite familiar with. And my work is more based on mood and trying to capture a certain feeling or a certain state of mind within a picture. So I think it would be helpful if I just pull up my screen and I can. This is actually a series I submitted for TOTO. It's called Oceanic Feeling. And just a little bit of info about this phrase. This was a phrase that was coined back in 1927 when Romain Rolland wrote a letter to Sigmund Freud. And he coined this phrase where he said that oceanic feeling was this kind of connection to the external world, like a complete sort of transcendence of the self and connecting to the external consciousness as a whole. I really like this phrase because this came the closest to describing my own experiences with nature. And I'm talking about like really unfettered and undisturbed nature, like in the deep wild, in forest, and in the Himalayas, for example, where I was staying alone for long periods of time, just sort of confronting myself and examining these feelings. So yeah, Oceanic Feeling is a project that is born out of this. And I think this is a phrase that can be sort of applied to my entire body of work. And yeah, I also want to talk a bit about these transcendented sort of feelings that I had. So I used to go on walks a lot last year, and even the year before that, it became a sort of a habit to just take my camera, take a journal, take a really good ambient music playlist, and then just go into a forest or go hiking. And I used to write a lot. I used to write fragments of what I was feeling. And I obviously use the camera to take take these photos of landscapes, right? But I wanted to give landscapes a certain treatment. I didn't want to just showcase them as straightforward landscapes, right? I really wanted to sort of imprint my own memories and my inner self within them, which is why I employ colors and surreal compositions. I use a lot of double exposures, for example, to bring out this feeling of surreality or the mystical nature of nature. So that is a short, I guess, introduction about my work. I also would like to show some other photos which thematically belong with this work, but they're not part of the series as submitted. But these are photos that I've developed outside of that, which I guess borrow from that same field. So I think ultimately I would like my work to be a reminder that nature is still a portal, right, to yourself, to confronting what is within you. And I think that is a frontier that is actually disappearing in our culture because we have sort of waged a war against nature, not knowing we have waged a war against ourselves, because we have defined a sort of relationship, we have defined a border between man and nature, which is untrue, right? Because we are part of nature. We are just a very evolved species, but in our complex sort of cultural habits and the entire aspect of civilization, right? We've forgotten that we are a part of all of this. So it's not really a statement that is inherent within these works, but that is something I feel really strongly about. So I feel like that was context that I needed to add as well. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Vijay. It was nice to know where photography kind of entered your life and what it's the journeys it's kind of helped you kind of take on from there. So thanks so much for sharing that. Shall we move to Prakash?
Hello, everybody. First of all, I would like to thank the TOTO Stars, the entire group for organizing this space and giving us this space to share our work, talk about work. My name is Prakas Bear. I am based in Assam, Guwahati. I'm a poet first and then a photographer. And currently, I work as a freelance photojournalist and work for different media houses. So my journey with photography actually started from words. Being a poet, I'm very attached to words and how the expressive power that they have. In 2013, the person who was very close to my sort of life, in a sense, my mom, she passed away. And that was a period of tremendous grief for me. I didn't know, I was young, I didn't know how to process grief. And what happened is that I couldn't write poetry anymore. Words would not come out. And then another thing happened is that after she passed away, and I started looking at the albums that we had in our home, I realized that I didn't have a single photo of me with her. I mean, like both of us in the same frame. And in a way, that was not so unusual because we didn't have a camera in our home. I grew up in a village, but that thing bothered me that I didn't have a picture with her. And after that, I couldn't write poetry. I needed to find a way to express myself, and there was tremendous grief that I was going through. So I picked up a mobile phone and started like experimenting with image. And slowly, somebody told me, one of my friends told me that maybe you should try photography. And then that's how I came to the medium. And I fell in love with this medium. Its ability to express things so subtly and quietly, and also its ability to hold on to memories. So uh, in 2007, I went to Pachala to pursue photography as a discipline, study. And there, in our, at the end of the course, we had to produce a body of work. And at that time, I was very new to photography. And the project that I applied for this award, and the work that I'm going to show you now, it was started in 2018 at the end of our course. And I think I should just share my screen and show you some of the pictures as I talk about the work in the process. Like I said, I started this work in 2018. What happened is that we had a residency as as part of our curriculum, and we were taken to this place, to this district called Sylhet in Bangladesh, and we were supposed to make a work. So there, I got to know from the local people then that the border was very nearby, and there was a small village of Garo people near the border. And I was curious to see the border because this ideas of division, the ideas of separation, border, where things differ, it always piques my interest. So I was interested to go there and to see. I didn't have any idea or didn't have any plan to make work as such. I just wanted to go and see the border and meet the people. And when I went there and I was roaming around, and I met people from the village, and they would ask me where I'm from, and I said, I'm from Assam, and the people were happy to sort of know that I'm from Assam, and I was in a way surprised by that. Why? And then I started to talk to the people, and they started telling me their stories, their family history in a way. And soon after, I came to realize, in a borderland, how the border sort of affects, one's sense of belonging, sense of identity, sense of a family. We have a sense of family where, like maybe it's one house, one courtyard, one village. And then there's a different sense of family which runs across, boundaries, runs across borders. And that was very moving for me. It was very moving. It was very intimate. So over the time, in the next, in the following years, I visited the place again and again, and started uh, making photographs there. In the beginning, it was very difficult because I came to know about the history of the place. There's tremendous political history of the place. There's the history of the partition of the subcontinent. Then the border fence was erupted there in 2011. Beginning from 2011, the government started building the border fence, which was a visible marker uh, for the local people that they are part of now a nation state. The nation state in a way came to their doorstep, which didn't exist before. That kind of sense of division didn't exist before. Even the border was there, but the fence was not there, so the visible marker was not there. Um, so in the beginning, it was sort of difficult for me to figure out a way how to talk about this so intimate at the same time so universal and um, geographically and politically charged story. And then I realized, that the most intimate kind of truths are the emotional truths, the truths that people feel, And I decided to build this narrative, build this story around that element, this element of a shared longing, of a shared feeling of belonging, of family, separation. So I gave the title. The title changed over time. First, it was a different title and changed. Then one day I was looking at the Google Art, and I was looking at this place, looking at the border and looking at the place, and then I realized that there is a river which originates in Manipur in India. In India, it's called Barak River. That river flows and bifurcates near the border. It bifurcates into two different rivers. One is Kushiara, and the second one is Surma. Both this river flows through Bangladesh. And the Surma River flows very nearby to the village. The name of the village is Mugaipar, where I made this particular work. And Mugaipar is a village where it's mostly Garo people. The village was settled there in 1952, but a Christian missionary is there. So this village is, you know, we can say that on the bank of the river Suma, and this idea of how a river crosses the border and it's the same river but it's different names, and people claim the river, you know, differently in different countries. You know, from that I got the idea of, you know, how about the name across, because it is something, the river is something which in a way defied the boundaries that you know, uh, the politics, the desire of human being sort of made this, you know, separation. The river defied it and it flowed across. She is the oldest woman in the village, and she has her three sons on the other side and four daughters on Bangladesh side of the border. The woman here, her name is Renu Diplo. She had a sister from whom she separated in 1964. And when I made this image in 2018, her sister passed away 1 year earlier. And she still didn't know. This story was told me by her brother, and her brother didn't tell her because both the sisters were very close to each other. The brother didn't tell her, thinking that, you know, she might not be able to take the news.
Right.
Caitlin worked for 20 years there. I'll just quickly zip through the images.
No, and we can come back to these as, you know, when we start discussing the works as well.
Yeah.
Thanks so much,
Thank
Prakash.
you. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. So we're going to move from Prakash's work to Farheen's, which is about longingness, but a different kind of longing, I think, right? Farheen, do you want to tell us more about that and about yourself?
Yeah, thank you. I want to again start with thanking TFA and for organizing this amazing panel and for shortlisting all of us and bringing us together. I'll start with my introduction. I'm Farin Fatma. I'm from Chandigarh and I'm a photographer and a visual artist. I started photography as a hobby, as most of us do, around 10 years ago. And slowly, I uh, pivoted towards portraiture, which is very dear to me. And me being a very introverted kid who didn't have a lot of friends and didn't have the courage to talk to people, portraiture and photography was a very good medium to sort of hide behind the camera and still connect. I went to a girls' school, and because I was surrounded by so many young girls at that point of time, and I started making a lot of portraits, and that began from 2015. Around that began my sort of a very long journey, which still continues, of photographing women. And when I started looking back at my work of 4 years, 5 years, I realized that I have I used to photograph women in a very male gaze, and it made me realize that I used to maybe look at myself from the same perspective as I was looking at them, not from a or not seeing them as how they are, rather seeing them from a very male gaze, which has been taught to us through media and through people around us in society and everything. And I started making a conscious effort of seeing women as who they are, their personality, what they are made of, rather than how we are taught to see them. And so that has been my majorly my work. And because I was making my own portraits and I was doing art direction, everything, which slowly transitioned into me being a fashion photographer and doing campaigns and everything. So that is, I work as a freelancer as well. And but documentary is something which is now new to me, but I really want to slowly get into it and know people more. And how, I don't know, photography has taught me so much to connect with people, and I want to take it further and tell stories of people. And that is where I would come to my project, which was selected in the awards. So I'll share my screen. So this project is called Intermission Distance, and this came to me in around 2000, in last year, 2021, during the initial days of the second lockdown, and we were in that gloomy phase. Oh, again, we are going into something. So we are going to go into this stuck into our houses and this lonely phase that we've dreaded from the first lockdown, and it sadly turned out to be even more devastating as the last one. But the being alone and away from your loved ones and away from the people that you care about the most. And so this is where the whole concept came of solitude and longing in the pandemic, and how it is something that sort of connects all of us, but still we keeps us disconnected. And so I thought about how can I sort of shoot people who are not, if I can be with them physically. And I reached out to people on Instagram, and a lot of people thankfully came out and they wanted to tell their stories. And I started connected with these couples who would forcefully sort of in long distance relationships in these COVID times, somewhere in some other country, and other countries, someone even in same cities, but they couldn't meet. So this is where it came from, and I started using a new app which is called the Shutter app, and I started photographing them using that app, which allows you to use the subject's camera phone, and you can photograph them, and sort of a video call situation, but it gives you a better quality, and you can be in control as a photographer more. And I started talking to a lot of people and their stories, and I started recording them, documenting them. And it's sort of very surreal, hopeful journey of seeing how everybody is going through the similar problems and how everybody has their ways of dealing with them. I can take you through like, for example, one portrait, how I combined the whole images. So this is the portraits of hands, which I am very drawn to hands in general, and I've always been. So I wanted to see how touch and how people want their loved ones to be around them, and how comfort and warmth is provided by hands, but that's not something which is possible in these times. So I wanted to, in a way, bring together the two pairs of hands of a couple visually, and create a sort of a time capsule for them, which even if they look at 10 years from now, it should remind them of their hope and their struggle and what they had been through, and they still sort of stayed strong and together. So this is sort of the two pairs of hands of the couples, and I try to incorporate illustrations, because for me illustrations is a thing that I don't see it as something different from my art practice. I see it as a part of my photographs, and I don't see photographs at this point of time, because I've been doing illustrations for a couple of years now with my photographs. So now I don't see photographs, simple plain photographs, as like an end product. I see it as a base on which I can create more and say more visually through collages or illustrations or whatever that medium can be. And here you can see I have combined and made sort of like a collage of like four hands of two people, but I also see that as an abstract image of these hands, which is sort of a creature on its own. It's an entity on its own, which breathes and lives together. But like I have brought them together visually, but they were not really there. And I have also made portraits of the couples while I was photographing their hands in those sessions which I did with them. So I have combined the photographs of the two couples also together, sort of create a almost like a sort of a couple's portrait that we are used to seeing, but this is my way of showing it, and my way of combining these two people together. So this is how the whole project came together. this is another couple that sort of I tried my ways of combining their images together. I also like one way of thinking is also that we always have uh, photographic memories of our happy moments of we are going out together or a wedding or whatever. But what about like these COVID times when you are not together, but the person is sort of there with you, and but we so I combined the images together to create a memory of lockdowns and pandemic and everything, and bringing these two people together.
Thank you so much for that, Farheen.
Thank you.
That was really nice to see the process behind the images as well. I think that was quite interesting. And I'm definitely curious about uh, your your look at the simple plain photograph and the photograph that you create. So I think I'm sure we're going to talk about that. But before we do, we still have Brishbhanu with us, and we haven't yet seen his work. Brishbhanu, do you want to take over from here?
Yeah, thanks. Hi, I'm Brish, and thanks TFA, and thanks Anshika. I am primarily a filmmaker. Uh, like I graduated with film direction from FTII, and a little background of me would be like I grew up with my grandmother like for a large part of my childhood. So the entire way or paradigm of how I think and how I imagine things and how I tell stories has been actually kind of I've inherited it from her. So there is a sense of discursivity in the way she talks about things, and also the way she moves in tangents from one plane to the other. And because mostly we spend it in a suburban space, not really a rural space but a suburban space, so we had a lot of time in hand because I also was in a boarding school. So I had those 3 months during winter break where I would spend all my time with her, and it was mostly mundane. So there is this kind of sense of wonder that emanates from the mundane that I kind of find. So, majorly, I'm interested in trying to push the limit of the digital image and try and kind of the sense of wonder that I'm talking about that I begin with come across in the material itself. And that is so, even with, let's say, I've been involved with different kinds of experimental practices where I'm trying to bring out more than what is actually seen, and kind of the sense of that the image actually holds a little bit more than actually how the camera records, and try and create something out of it. And that is something that is a major element of my work. And also through this kind of talk about and share my ideas about like the individual experience, especially dreams, myths, memories, which are kind of intangible and not really coherent with the kind of linear reality which Vijay was also talking about. And it's in that I'm kind of my approach is kind of similar to what Vijay was talking about as well. And with the glitch, of course, I'm trying to bring forth the notion of noise that is actually inherent in all sorts of digital data, and that the communication that happens, like between the viewer and the computer, because eventually the digital image is actually being coordinated through a machine. And so there is that kind of communication error that is actually inherent in all images. And through glitch, I'm trying to bring forth that into the material itself and try and see if that can create a poetic experience. And with that, of course, the sense of wonder. And through it all, there is also the kind of performance of the image which is where I will move towards my submission. So, Jesus in Suburbia is about this very small church in the suburban parts of Guwahati, which my grandmother used to occasion when she had rediscovered her roots in Christianity, because she had grown up in a foster home, which was a tribal Christian home, the tribal Christian family. So she, over time, with age, she has kind of gone back to those roots of like Christianity. And this entire series is of just one day. It's actually the idea of just first impressions of the sense of wonder that you feel when you kind of come across something that you've not experienced personally or face to face before. It's like a child seeing like an airplane for the first time. So that kind of that is my position while I took these photographs. Like I've placed myself as an observer, and of course the series also documents the performance of devotion that these people have. It was actually on a Palm Sunday, which is the Sunday when Jesus Christ was put on the cross. So these people are kind of enacting or performing while singing out the same pain, that trying to imbibe the same pain that Christ must have felt while he was being put on the cross. And so, as a the observer who's not a Christian and not really a believer, it's the sense of wonder which is actually negotiating the relationship between me and the subject. And of course, I've taken like short, try to like visually play with the idea of like how children are present at the scene as well, who are not really into the performance as well, to kind of heighten the idea that the sense the that how they have not really perceived the idea of performance, but that there is a performance which is going on, and I'm like, and their presence actually, the way they look into the camera is actually kind of highlighting the fact that there is someone, and that someone is actually not like a fly in the wall kind of an observer. I think that's it.
Thanks so much for that, Brish. It's interesting to see how, we have four artists. If I were to say that, practicing in different mediums, coming from different points of interest, and in many ways using those interests as in photography as expression. And I think for me it's been very interesting to see all your works, but to also understand where you come from. As we're starting this out, I think one of the questions that came to me when I was looking at each of your works was to also understand, uh, with the work that you're doing, the concepts come from very personal places of relationships, right? Like whether it's a personal idea of longing, or Brish, in your case, your relationship with your grandmother. Vijay, for you it was personal to a completely different degree, where it's actually trying to deal with a mental health crisis scenario. And for you, Prakash, it was also about really navigating and re-questioning the assumptions that we have when we consider nationalities and borders to come in, right? How is it that, in navigating with these concepts, when you pick up the projects that you have, the projects have always dealt with another, right, in many ways. And so how does that translation of that negotiation, which is an internal negotiation, translate when you're photographing someone who's outside of that? Is that making sense to you guys? Do you want to try and share some thoughts on that?
I think it really shows up like the way that my body of work and what I photographed before in the deeply beautiful landscapes, they come up here, and I'm finding little moments of dreaminess or little moments of mood or atmosphere, even within the context of a city, even within the context of this landscape, which I think is almost like a residual sort of element that is coming from my previous experiences and the previous ways I've captured things, right? So even when I'm present among when I'm present among landscapes or elements which are completely outside of the body of work that I find myself most comfortable with, I'm still bringing forth a certain sense of mood, a certain sense of feeling within them. I think, if that answered the question.
In the work that you've submitted, let's just say, that's been selected for the shortlist. I mean, you mentioned in one of our previous conversations how the landscape was something that you were immediately taken up by when you visited Dharamkot, right? Like for you, that landscape itself was so fresh and so new in so many ways. And it was not necessarily the landscape that you wanted to photograph, right? It had nothing to do with being in Dharamkot necessarily, but it was to talk about a much more internal experience that was going on. And it was the manifestation of that in a new landscape. So I'm also just curious to know, and I mean, also you did talk about how being there and kind of being there in the mind space that you were allowed for a certain kind of a transcendental experience, and I'm just curious to know, with the photograph emerging, like, would you say, which one did you say led to the other, in some ways?
Okay, that is quite interesting, because I always felt like it was a cyclical, in that I usually have an experience and then I try my best to put that to visual form, right? Because I really want a language to talk about that experience. And then once I put it to visual form, it's like that becomes an experience in itself that is feeding upon my next walk or the next adventure into the mountains, right? So I think it's almost cyclical, but I think it was mainly driven by my own personal sort of my own personal transformation of identity of the self when I delved into these landscapes. And I've always really loved photography, because for me it's been always been a way to talk, but I feel like it was just a channel, it was just a channel that I found really comfortable with, and I could have, if I'd really delved into it, I could have also expressed those feelings through writing or through music, which are also fields that I really in love with. So it was driven by the experience, for sure, the experience of being in a landscape that is so foreign yet familiar at the same time, because it felt like I was going back to my roots, or this is how the people used to live back then, before civilization. Like people used to live in the wild and they depended upon the land to provide them with everything they needed. So I think for me it was a way to connect with that, and that exact feeling was the one that sort of broke. That sort of was a way for me to unlearn everything that I've learned about identity and the self and being in the city as well. So
thanks, Vijay. Prakash, I mean, with Vijay saying it was about breaking and deconstructing our association with land, it immediately made me think of your work, where there's a different kind of a breaking of concept of land. Do you want to talk about how, I mean, one of the things with your work is, of course, there's the history of that border, and then there is the immediate, more personal experience of realizing that that border became a very trivial element in the relationships that you were developing. Do you want to talk about like that balance of like, how much do I consider the documentary journalistic aspect of this story and the personal emotional aspect of the story as well?
What I think is that, apart from beyond my bodily existence, everything is another. Only me is what I can claim towards. Apart from that, everything is other. So our relationship with the world is a relationship with other. That is number one. And secondly, what is other for me is not the same other for a different person. The other is very subjective. We often think that the other is a very sort of uniform idea, but it is not. So the sense of other also, differs. And while I was trying to make the work, when I got to know about the immense sort of political history and history of the landscape itself and the people. All of these things, at some point, because this idea of border starts with the assumption that you are different, that you are separated.
Hmm.
But I was not interested so much in that separation. For me, I want to photograph personal things, things that I want to keep in my memory, that I do not forget. It's not about making a statement out in the world. For me, it was to keep that in mind, to keep it in memory. So I approach this work from the idea of closeness, from the idea of similarity, idea of what is shareable. And in that sense, the landscape helped me in that way because I grew up in a very similar kind of landscape, open fields. You can hear the winds, the cows are on the field. It's very familiar. And I started from that point of familiarity. And because of that landscape, it also helped me to build this, personal connection with the people there. And because of, you know, the thing is that I do not have a sense of home. Like because I lost my parents, so my sense of home is sort of misplaced. I cannot find it. And when people opens their door for me and embrace me in their family and ask me like what you are doing, how you are doing this and that, then that's a new family that I have now. And I approach the whole project from that particular point of view. Of course, the sense of history and the politics, everything is there, but they sort of you know stayed as a reminder for me that
Mhm.
despite everything, we still can connect, and there is still connection.
You started this project because you got to know that they were, out of a sense of the other, right? Like it
Yeah,
was that, okay,
yeah,
this
yeah.
is the Garo tribe, and there's a curiosity, and you want to know about something that is already the other. And then, you chose to kind of negate that. How did that shift end up happening? Was there a particular
Yeah.
moment or a process?
While I was in college, I had Garo friends. So as a tribe, sort of, it was not so much of like seeing new people. I knew just I was just curious at the border initially, and then I got to know that the people are there. And this happened. This you were right that we start with the sense of other, and then what happened is that when I was talking to them, when I got more attached to the people, then I realized after a while, I couldn't make any pictures because I didn't know what to picture, what to photograph. Because the sense of separation, sense of otherness only makes you other. People do not you as a photographer, you become the other to yourself, your practice, or even to the subjects. For the people, I'm a visitor there. So, uh, so it was a change on my part to sort of slow down, think about it, and more than that, feel about it. And when that happens, I think the door opens. For me at least, that is what happened. I sort of hit a wall, and then I realized, it's not about making this and that statement about this politics, that border, this thing. It's about this closeness. It's about why I'm here. What makes me want to come back to this place over and over again. So at that point, the language of the photograph changed. My approach also changed.
Is photography your because you did mention that you were also working as a photojournalist, so you did take that direction of in some ways creating stories and archives about different issues or ideas or communities even. And I was just curious to know, is that something that's been primary to your practice as well?
Yeah, I think so. So in this project, I was thinking about the border of the land, the people, and the sense of belonging. And then I started a work in Assam itself. So that place is called Mazal. It's a river island. It's my ancestral home. So like I said, I didn't have a sense of home. So I wanted to find where my parents come from and to reconnect to that particular landscape. It's a very particular kind of landscape. It's a river island. So I went back there and started making a work that is still in progress as of now. So this sense of sort of, you know, approaching communities, and by that approach to sort of identify something that is common, with me, or to identify something mm, that is more close at heart, that is still going on in my practice.
And do you think that is also why you're part of like a collective which actually looks at focusing on stories and narratives from a region that has been massively, removed in the stories and histories of this country?
Yes, that was another primary reason. Yes, because you know, especially with the border work, what I realize is that this there are particular histories that are completely absent from our sense of history. They do not exist because of many things. Perhaps the archive is not there, the visual markers are not there. But it's important, otherwise it will get erased. So that was something that I realized, and that carry forward in this process also.
Thanks a lot for sharing
Thank
all
you.
of that,
Yeah,
Prakash.
thank you.
And speaking of kind of engaging with people, Farheen, your engagement with people has been very different, right? Like you've been primarily, if I'm not wrong, working in the capacity or in the genre of fashion, where your role from behind the camera had a certain degree of control into what you could create in front of you, and you find yourself kind of moving from that into uh, documentary and giving into chance maybe a little bit more. uh, Before we talk about the work, I want to know, and I'm just curious to know, how does that difference or lack of control feel for you today?
Like, as we all know, people like photographers spend a lot of time before the shoot prepping everything so that everything goes correctly, everything, there is no gaps in between. But when you are doing documentary, and especially in a virtual shoot, when the person is not you, who you are shooting is not a model, they are in their house, in their room, in their balcony or whatever, and they have to make do with whatever little resources you have got. So it brings out the creativity in you the most, because you have these few things and you have to make do with it. You can't demand for anything more. And that made me look at people and photography both in a very different light, and myself as well, as a creative person, that I don't know, we get very caught up in technology gear and better quality camera and everything. Nothing wrong with it, but like this basic, if you come back to it, is just photographing someone with anything you have, like any, that can be any phone, any camera, anything, old, new. That's the basic, and it brought me back to that. It doesn't matter what you're photographing someone with, or where they are, or who they are, as long as you have a genuine interest in talking to them and listening to them and what they have to say. So that was my uh, realization for as myself, as a photographer, and most importantly as people, of letting them be. And we do that, as I think, in like people who are in our lives as well. We try to sort of control them in little ways, and that was also a very learning experience, that uh, sometimes it's okay to let things be and go with the flow where they're going, and you'll reach somewhere, I guess. Yeah.
That's quite an interesting space to be at, especially when you're navigating that through a mobile phone, right? Like that entire dynamic change happens out of literally what you can see on a tiny screen in your hand. And I mean, I have to say, I had no idea about this app that you'd mentioned, before our last conversation, and I was quite intrigued by how something so tech driven was actually offering the capacity to deal with very intimate ideas as well. And I mean, it must have been very difficult, I'd imagine, to write to people or to have kind of like this announcement to say that I'd really want to shoot lovers who are apart, and can you talk about your lover to me, who is a person that they don't know, you know? And I'm just very curious to know, how is that, like how is I mean, you know, how does that conversation allow you or create a space for you to make portraits that would reflect who they were or how they felt at that point of time?
So again, it's sort of connected with the last question of control and what. After reaching out to people, so one level was clear that they were interested in, so there it's coming from them that okay, we are allowing you to sort of have that window in our personal space, and as well physical space as well as our emotional space. So that is one thing. Uh, to be honest, it was the month of, I'd spent a month shooting with like around 14, 15 couples. It was very emotionally tolling for me to listen to all of these very um, uh, intense stories of people and their struggles and their um, it had to take a lot of time off because I had to stop shooting after a certain point, that I couldn't listen to uh, these stories anymore because I had to take time and digest them and sort of process them in a way. So that is one part of it. Um, with and in terms of listening, in terms of them talking, which I'm not used to, again, because I'm new to documentary photography. So I explored a lot of things myself about myself as an artist. That how do you make someone comfortable in a situation where a camera is pointed at them and they know they are being seen by someone who they don't know, and then that person is talking to them, and then that person is asking them questions about their love life, and like how much they miss their lover, and how what all they do, be it video calls or be it simple calls, and reading books to each other at night, and singing to each other. Like everybody had their like little things, or doing virtual dates or cooking together in front of video calls. So everybody had their little things, but for them to able to talk and open about those things, it was a very slow learning process for me to make them comfortable by relating. Whenever I used to tell them my story, that I have been in similar situation, that I used to always make them sort of understand that I'm talking to not just a photographer, but I'm talking to a person who has seen similar situation or has similar experiences. That is again was the learning that I learned from like the first shoot to the 10th shoot, something like that. And me being an introvert, and somebody, if you're shooting with an introvert, it again becomes a challenge. So that was also a learning thing, that how to make someone comfortable and connect with them on an emotional level, not just a very superficial level, that which I struggle with, of just talking in a very shallow way with someone and not really getting to know them. So that
So
is
it required some little opening up from your end,
exactly.
and discomfort on that. Was there a pre-decision on what the visual needs to be? And how did you decide on that?
So how I work, because I'm a very self-taught person, everything I have learned on my own. And so my technique has always been gardening, not architecture. So gardening is a slow process which you see something grow slowly, and architecture is something that you structure it out and you define it and then you make it. So I just initially, it was just, I'm going to shoot these people and talk to these people. And when I had this large chunk of photographs of them, then I sat with them and I noticed where they are going, like what is the direction that these images want to take, rather than me taking them in a direction where I want to go. and sort of again like that losing control and let the images be wherever they want to be. And again, like the illustration, the collages, everything came organically because I was doing it, the illustration part, like with other projects as well. So it's just I it uh, sort of it became another tool to connect them, combine the images more more I don't know, like naturally, rather than I could have like superimposed them, or I could have done a lot of things which I actually tried. But again, trying a lot of things and seeing what goes, and again, like the gardening thing that I was talking about, this is slowly seeing how it's taking shape and where it's going. So that has been my technique that I have developed over the years. So yeah.
Great. Thanks so much for that, Farheen.
Thank
I'm
you.
gonna move to Brishbhanu, who Brish, like you mentioned, that you've actually primarily worked with the digital and the video format, right? And that has been your medium for a while. And so I'm also very curious to know, for this particular work, you did decide to go more still based, and you decided to kind of take more frozen moments of one event, as opposed to what let's say regular mode of kind of expression has been. And what was the kind of shift you felt that allowed for, and was that a conscious decision? Was that, were there particular factors that were specific to picking up a still camera for this?
As a film student, we still had to like go into the idea of the static image or the still image, and we studied a lot of paintings. We did practice taking photographs, so that was like it was actually part of our complete exercise, and the idea of filmmaking per se. Like every filmmaker, like even like the filmmakers that I do admire a lot, like Chris Marker, Eric Baudelaire, or even Raul Ruiz, they've all like not just dabbled in filmmaking, but they've also moved to other arts. Like Chris Marker was actually a brilliant photographer, and one of his films, La Jetée, was actually a photo roman, which is completely made of photographs. And that idea, again, I also was reading John Berger a lot at a certain point in my life back when I was a student, and he constantly kept talking about like how moving images, painting, drawing, and photographs temporally are very different. With photography, it's like it's just record. It's just pure record when it comes to documentary photography, and it's like there is like a sequence of time, and then suddenly when you take a photograph, you just kind of isolate it. Like it no longer belongs to a linear structure of time. It's just been isolated, and it's just completely at loss, and it's somewhere like flying around, floating around. And with that, I also have I also was reading Borges a lot. So Borges has this idea of like how everything is interconnected. There is a cyclicity, there is this eternal recurrence, and every image is actually the history of images is basically just like a repetition that constantly is in a sense of polyphony, that you are like maybe the photograph that you take in the 21st century, like someone takes it on a mobile, might just resemble exactly like how like a proto man, proto human hand printed on a cave. So I kind of have those ideas in the back of my mind while I'm taking like while I go out to work. But again, it's then again, of course, Kiarostami was another influence. Kiarostami had this very interesting thing to say, that when I think of an idea, I never imagine what its output is going to be. It can probably turn into a film, it can turn into a poem, it can probably be just like a scribble, or it can just be a diary entry. And that is also something that I've imbibed in my practice over time. Like I don't think too much about the output. Like, okay, what is it going to be? Like, I have this idea and I think, okay, probably I wanted to go. That is why when I had narrated that entire incident, so I had no idea when I'd gone there, when I visited the church, that Was I going to actually make a photo series out of it? Was I going to make a film out of it? Or was I going to return back empty handed? I was actually open to all sorts of possibilities. And with this series, it so happened that all of it, as I said, it was all first impressions. Like I had this and I shot all of them, and then I came back and I was like, okay, this is it. I can't do anything better than this. With this, like whatever I have, the kind of interaction that I had with them, the relationship that I shared with them, this was probably it. I couldn't go back and like film them properly. And then that kind of authenticity in my head would just have eroded.
And I'm just curious to know at which point or what kind of directed you, from a very intuitive space or from a very organic, method that you do have, towards the still image to look at kind of like these moments that are frozen in time, as well. And yeah, I mean, I'm just curious to know, like, for someone who
Yeah,
practices multiple disciplines, how do you negotiate which format goes for a particular
yes.
experience?
Uh, Primarily, it was a very intuitive process. Like I've just gone there, and the first 1 hour just went about and just soaking in like what's actually happening. So it was like a chaotic experience for me for the first 1 hour because a lot of things were happening. Like someone was asking me to come and sit somewhere. Someone was asking me who am I? Then they suddenly just called me up on the stage and felicitated me. And then they were like, "Oh, this is this person's grandson. She used to come here." And then everyone was clapping. Then everyone was singing. They were all happy. They came and gave me like snacks, and so much was happening. I was trying to soak in completely. And at that point in time, it just I felt I didn't know. Like it was all being recorded in my head, and it was so much. It was like overload of experience. So I like what happens is like whenever even now when I think of like the things that I love and the memories that I go back to, it's not like all of them are like movement images. They're all static, probably static stills that you have. Like even now, uh, like if someone just asks, "Do you remember Titanic?" and the first image that the person might have is of Jack and Rose standing on the starboard and like with their arms spread out. That's probably just one image, but then that's not actually the entire film. That's not the entire experience of like watching the film. But for me, with them, it was, because so much was happening, I was just picking up on like what were the most exciting things, like what were the things that were actually making me feel wonder so much. Like suddenly, when they started crying, at just like the drop of the hat, when suddenly the woman came over to the mic, Martha was actually sitting there. Martha was that woman in blue who was sitting on the chair on the dais with the cross behind her. So she was smiling one moment all of a sudden. I've taken that photograph, and the next moment she just came up to the mic and she started speaking something. I started narrating the story of Jesus, and all of a sudden she just began crying. And so those moments, those little moments when suddenly everything was like chaotic, and then suddenly everything would come to like a kind of homogeneity in a sense, like if I'm making sense, like there would be like a kind of harmony and movement in the like which would probably bring out uh, the essence of that place at that point in time on a Palm Sunday. Otherwise, it would be like a crowd that was actually bustling around, and then suddenly, when the mention of Jesus came in, and they started performing that devotion, someone started crying loudly. Someone started praying to Jesus, like their arms spread wide, and those moments and those gestures that they actually all performed were all kind of homogeneous. So that was kind of, and it was not like someone was orchestrated to do that. Like now raise your hand, now cry like this. No, all of them suddenly did that in unison. Like one person started crying, and then there was someone at the other end, they were also crying, and all of them had similar performances, similar gestures. So those were the things that was probably the moment in time, if I have to think back retrospectively, which is when I thought like, okay, these are the moments that I want to carry from here. Like I want to show my grandmother also. Like, okay, I went there, see. And she was very happy. Oh, see, they do this. Oh yeah, Jesus, they must have been. And she immediately recognized those moments. Oh yeah, this must have been the time when they were singing those hymns. And probably Jesus, they were probably narrating the entire event of him carrying the cross. That is why she kept. So those gestures were also kind of universal markers.
That's actually quite interesting. What I found very interesting while we were, having this conversation is also that for you, you felt that once you'd been there and you came back, you saw these images and you kind of realized uh, which moments out of that day's engagement kind of held together for you as almost like a reminder of that day. And for you that was the closure to maybe this particular work as well. Am I right in
Yeah,
saying
yeah,
so? Yeah.
yeah.
And it feels like for the other three photographers that we do have here, that uh, their response has kind of been extended from the current engagement. And I know we're definitely a little long on time, although I want to have many more conversations with you. But let's say, just as a wrap up note, obviously from Prakash, from Farheen and Vijay, who I know that these are works in progress, it'd be really nice to know uh, where you see and what direction you see this work going in. And Brish, I'm also just very curious to understand, uh, is there something else that has caught onto your eye, or is there a work that you're currently picking up on or continuing that you might want to share something about?
With regards to this series or something else entirely?
Well, if there's something else happening within this
Oh,
series, for
no,
sure,
nothing.
please.
Yeah, like I said, like how I imagine the way I work and design of it is like a tree. It's like if it's branching out and it's flowering. Some flowers turn into like good fruits. Some just don't turn ripe and they fall off. So personally, this series ended there that day itself. Although I did go back another day, but then for me, like what I carry series, I think that is where it actually that was the purpose. I think it served the purpose for me while I'm constructing this entire universe of stories that I'm trying to recreate. I think it served its purpose there. Now I could probably extend it, like go into like deeper into how their community life is, and also the other churches everywhere. That would be a good documentary study, of course. Like how is this church functioning? What are its
You did
ideas and everything?
mention at one stage that was the direction you were
Yeah,
thinking
I
about.
did. Yeah, but then eventually I thought like when I came back to the like when I was watching or like looking back at the photographs, I was like, this kind of thread was not actually pulling through the way I would have imagined it to be, so I let it be. So at times I kind of as a well in my artistic process, it's also something if it's left incomplete, I'm fine.
Do you think it would then be right if you've chosen to kind of stop midway in a journey to then still put the work out as midway? I mean, uh, what do you think that would do for the people who are in the photographs? Because then they're kind of shown, but not really shown for the story that you wanted to tell, right?
The presence of photographer is very much present there in the series itself. It's not like so it's not just about, so I make it apparent that it's not just about them, but it's also about the way I'm looking, and so that kind of forms so I kind of, maybe it's the like I'm still trying to negotiate and tackle those kind of issues, like how what is the objective way of looking at something. So I kind of move away from that idea and that, okay, let objectivity be. I'm going to put my subjective experience of something there, out there in front. So, no, for me, the incompleteness of this project itself is just the essence of the project, the series, and the emotions which is why when I said that these are actually first impressions of of the other, going and looking at the other, is what I edited the series out to be.
Okay, great. Thanks so much for that, Brish. And I'm sorry, guys. I know we're way beyond time, but it would be really nice to know from Vijay, Prakash, and Farheen where they see their own works. I know their projects are still continuing. Is there a different direction do you see this going in, or is it the rhythm that you're on? You want to expand on that, or something else as well? Please do share that with us too.
I have a friend who's a painter. Her name is Ritika Pandey. And we were thinking about expanding upon it by basically printing out one of my images but cropped in half, and she draws on the other side of the image. So that is one idea that we came up with, and I think that would be quite interesting to explore. Even though we haven't really sketched it out yet, but I feel like that could be the direction the series could go in. I also Oceanic Feeling has been mostly about Joy's experiences with nature, but I also really wanted to capture the full truth of what I've been experiencing there, which is also that our relationship with the land is very, very estranged, and like we are going through a crisis with respect to nature, right? So I would like to I don't want to take the documentary approach with this because it's been taken multiple times. And I really want to use a fine art approach to talk about the suffering that we bring upon ourselves by having a very by divorcing ourselves from nature. So I guess that's another potential direction this project could take.
Thanks, Vijay. That sounds very, very exciting. I look forward to the collaborations that emerge from this.
In my case, in this project, I'm thinking of making a video blog where I'm thinking of interviewing, people from the community, and then using the ambient landscape sounds that you can find that I can find. So that is one. I'm still sort of pondering upon that idea. And the other idea was to shoot on the other side of the border, similar kind of village, and to shoot in the other side of the border. It's still on the research phase. And I think border will be a sort of long-term engagement for me in terms of work, because here it's Indo-Bangladesh border. Currently, I'm researching on Indo-China border. So, like, I think I'll follow a similar template, or maybe it will be different. I don't know, but border will definitely be one of the theme that I'll engage in, I guess.
Has there been a conversation with people in that village yet?
Yeah, I'm constantly in touch with them. Yeah, so during the first lockdown and then the first wave of COVID uh, and everything, it was very difficult for them. I was in constantly in touch with them, talking on the phone. Apart from COVID and all, it's life. Things changed. One of my sort of uh, like one of my subject, sort of whom I ended up calling as uncle, like mother's brother. He passed away in 2020, and he was a very important character in the whole story because he worked in Meghalaya as a construction worker, and he knew a lot about the place, about the geography. And I interviewed him, I recorded, but then I wanted to do a video work only on him. He passed away in 2020 in December.
I'm so sorry to hear that.
You build this very intimate connection. It's like family, extended family you get, and then yeah.
Yeah, no, I can imagine that these are no longer. I mean, in your engagement with the community, it had been going on for a very long time, both physically and on the phone. So there are many moments that then get shared as well, and leads to a different nature of a relationship to also develop. Well, I hope you're able to make it back to Bangladesh and meet your other home soon enough as well.
I hope so. Yeah, I hope so.
Thanks, Prakash. Farheen.
One thing is that
Is COVID important for you to continue this work? Is my question.
So one thing that I want to do is continue shooting as many couples as I can and compile sort of sort of a project on bigger, larger project on changing nature of love and relationships uh, in pandemic. So this is one thing, and the other thing which I realized is a lot of people unfortunately sort of separated while I was working on the project. So so usually how I'm at least at this point doing is that I contact them, and if they're okay with the sharing their story, that what led to them being separated, and I shared their images as well, but not as combined uh, portraits, not as combined hands, but as single entities, and how they are going forward after that. So that is like, that's two things that's on my mind currently where I want to take it. Yeah.
The story of the hands shall continue on. Well, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for sharing. Your own process, your own thoughts. I know that for many of you, these are probably the first times that you're talking about these particular projects, and so there's a lot to unpack and unravel as we go forward. And I wish you all the absolute best in your current work, in your ongoing work. And yeah, I mean, good luck for the final judgment, as they say, right? Thank you so much, everyone.